I wish I'd never started working out. Submitted by K. Peck. 3, 2, 1. Happy New Year! Shouted the mass of people gathered in my parents' living room. I poured myself another drink, looking down at the stomach that had been growing ever larger since I started drinking and eating more due to my depression. I glanced at my oldest sister across the room, hanging on the arm of her perfect 10 boyfriend. She was wearing a pair of shorts that showed off her long, toned legs that she had earned through Pilates. She flipped her blonde hair over her shoulder and laughed at some joke Mr. 10 had cracked. I shifted my gaze to my younger sister. Her beautiful, dark brown hair swung behind her as she danced with her equally gorgeous friends. Both of them were rail thin, and both of them rocked a perfect six-pack. I sighed in jealousy of their perfect bodies. I had always been the ugly one. It's not that my face is hideous, or that I'm severely obese. I just had an awkward body shape that I never really grew into, and I always had trouble finding jeans that didn't give me one hell of a muffin top. It didn't help that I was too lazy to exercise either. I picked up my refilled glass and brought it to my lips, but before I could take a sip, I was interrupted. "So, what's your New Year's resolution, Kylie?" spoke a low, male voice from my left. I looked over at him. I had no idea why he would be talking to me. This guy was, like, an 8 at least. I didn't recognize him, and I had no idea how he knew my name, but I was slightly too tipsy to question it. I put my glass down and looked into his blue eyes that almost seemed to sparkle. They were hypnotizing. Without thinking, I blurted out, "I guess I want to feel better about myself." I felt a pang of shame and embarrassment. Why did I tell him that? When his hand touched my shoulder, those feelings melted away. I relaxed. "Well, you know, taking care of yourself is incredibly important. Do you go to a gym?" I felt my cheeks redden. Was it that obvious that I didn't? No. I don't really like gyms, you know what I mean? Too many people watching and judging. Plus, it's pretty easy to hurt yourself if you don't know what you're doing. He nodded knowingly, and his face lit up. "I actually think I have just the thing for you. If you looked at me today, would you guess that I used to be 270 pounds? I used to hate how I looked." I raised my eyebrows. He seemed like a pretty fit guy. I couldn't imagine him being more than 180. He laughed at the obvious shock on my face. "Here, see for yourself," he said, taking out his phone and selecting a picture from his photo album. Lo and behold, there he was. Before, he looked like he could have eaten a whole person. Maybe two. And now? Healthy and slim. It was impressive, to say the least. "How?" I breathed in disbelief. He smiled widely as he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small blue flash drive. "With this," he said proudly, then extended the flash drive to me. I didn't take it immediately. "What is that?" I asked. "It's a series of exclusive workout videos. These are the kind that celebrities use," he replied, pushing the flash drive into my hand. Part of me wondered if he carried that with him everywhere, or if he had a whole bunch that he just handed out to everyone. Anyways, I gotta head out. It was nice meeting you, Kylie. Happy New Year, and good luck with your resolution. And just like that, he was gone. I opened my hand and stared at the device in my palm. Shrugging, I put it in my pocket and stepped away from the bar. After my encounter with the man whose name I couldn't recall, the man with the wide smile, I decided I didn't really feel like talking to anyone else, so I called a cab and went back to my apartment. When I got home, I tossed the flash drive in the drawer of miscellaneous items that everyone has in their house and forgot about it for 3 months. By the time April rolled around, I had gained 15 pounds. One day, I found myself looking in the mirror with tears rolling down my cheeks. That was the moment I decided I needed to make a real change. I rummaged around in my junk drawer until I found what I was looking for. Then, I inserted the flash drive into my laptop's USB port and waited. After a few moments, a window popped up on my screen. The drive contained only 3 MOV files labeled Round 1, Round 2, and Final Round. How could 3 videos make someone lose 100 pounds? I thought to myself. I brushed it off after all, routine is important. I clicked on Round 1. The video window appeared, and I maximized it to fill my screen. The instructor waved. She looked to be about my age, but her body was as dissimilar from mine as it could possibly be. She, whose name I learned was Tanya, was the absolute healthiest looking woman I had seen in my life. Her body was lean and muscular, and her waist looked as though it had been caged in a corset for years. She looked like a straight-up Olympian. Being healthy isn't just about looking amazing. It's about feeling amazing, inside and out. Achieve the body of your dreams and increase the love of your mind, body, and soul. Otherwise, you're bound to see your quality of life suffer. She smiled widely, the same kind of grin that the man at the New Year's party had given me. I shuddered at the similarity, but decided to focus on the workout instead of worrying about it. Tanya positioned herself on her elbows and toes, back and legs parallel to the ground in a perfect plank. We're going to start with our abs today, but I want you to engage your brain too. Remind yourself that you are beautiful, and hold, yes. That's what I'm talking about. And 3, 2, 1. Great job. Let's move on. I followed her as best as I could, but I was out of shape and my core refused to cooperate. Instead of reminding myself of my beauty, I was reminded about how much hatred I had for my own body. I fucking suck at this, I thought angrily, but I wasn't ready to quit. I struggled my way through 30 more minutes of pain, but when I saw that there was a whole other half hour left, I collapsed on the floor. Cursing, I shut my laptop and got up for a drink of water. I gulped the cool liquid down like a dehydrated horse and walked, hand on my already sore belly, to my bathroom mirror. Pulling up my shirt, I gazed at my body and stifled a sob. I was never going to look like her. I just couldn't do it. I put the flash drive back in the drawer. My depression worsened over the next month, and it got even worse when my oldest sister died unexpectedly. The doctors couldn't quite figure out what happened. It was one of the most bizarre things they had ever seen, apparently. Over the course of the month my sister had stopped eating and began to lose weight, but the rate at which she lost weight was so fast, much faster, even, than the worst eating disorder cases any of her doctors had seen before. She wasted away so quickly, right before my eyes, and before we knew it, she was gone. Not even her recently placed feeding tube could save her. We buried her skeletal remains on a Tuesday. I was supposed to give the eulogy at her funeral, but I was too broken to do it. I handed over the duty to my other sister. All I could think during the funeral was how much I would miss her, how suddenly she was taken from me, and how much I hated myself for the distance that had come between us. My mental state had driven us further and further apart, and I never had the chance to say goodbye. Over the next month, I tried to distract myself by immersing myself in my hobbies. Alas, I found myself at a complete lack for creativity as my depression got the best of me. One day, I was distracting myself by cleaning out unnecessary junk in the house, when I once again stumbled upon the blue flash drive. I picked it up and turned it over in my hand. I looked back at the dozens of garbage bags full of all the crap in my life and decided to try again. It was time for round 2. Alright, today we're gonna start with some squats, but I need you to do something else too. I need you to think super hard about how wonderful you are. You are strong, powerful, and fierce. If you believe it, you will feel it, too. Ready? Let's go. Tanya squatted for what seemed like an eternity. My ass was on fire. You got this. Come on. Love yourself. I believe in you, she cheered. Fuck you. I shouted at the screen and collapsed. Suddenly, Tanya stopped moving and cheering. You have to love yourself. Otherwise, you're bound to see your quality of life suffer. The screen went black. This time, I didn't try to stifle my crying. I was so disappointed in myself, and I fucking missed my sister. I thought about how beautiful she was and how much she must have loved herself, something I could never seem to do. I left the drive in my computer and closed the laptop on the dining table. I didn't open it at all for another month, not until after what happened to my second sister. I shuffled into the hospital room, squinting under the bright fluorescent lights. Tentatively, I called out my little sister's name. A moment later, a tiny, weak voice responded. Kylie? I walked forward and drew back the curtain around her bed. Have you ever seen a mummy before? They're completely dehydrated and have papery, gray skin. They are frail and pencil thin, and their souls have left their bodies. That's what my sister looked like. Oh. My voice trembled. I reached out a hand to touch hers, and it was so cold, so bony. I tried to keep myself from shaking. Kylie, what's happening to me? According to the doctors, she was at 3% body fat. Today it looked like 2. I don't know, but we're gonna find out, okay? I promise, I said, my voice breaking and giving away my lie. A tear rolled down her cheek. Fuck, I was such an idiot. She closed her eyes, and didn't open them when I tried to wake her. Her heart rate was slowing, but she was still alive. Panicking, I ran to the door to get a nurse, but the door was closed. Standing in front of it was none other than Tanya. I gasped and nearly jumped out of my skin. She smiled at me, that eerily wide smile, with its perfectly straight, white teeth. Why, what are you doing here? How did you? You were bound to see your quality of life suffer, she interrupted with her sweet, cherry voice. A lump was beginning to form in my throat. What does that mean? What are you doing to my sister? I screamed at her. You were bound to see your quality of life suffer, she said again with a grin and stepped closer, but this time, her voice was warped and distorted. I released my bladder. Her smile dropped. The room fell silent. Love yourself, she said evenly, back in her regular voice. Then, all of a sudden, she began to grow and change, her body twisting and her limbs cracking to form impossible angles. Her legs elongated and sat back on enormous, animal-like haunches. Talons, sharp as razor blades, extended from each of her gnarled fingers. Danya's eyes rolled so far backward in her head that her optic nerves were torn and her eyes began to bleed. Her lips drew back and exposed long, yellow fangs and a writhing tongue frothing with saliva. I stumbled backward and fell on my ass. Oh shit, I thought, this is how I die. I squeezed my eyes shut and shielded my face. I felt the creature move swiftly across the room and braced myself for the pain that was sure to come, but instead, I heard squishing, sucking sounds coming from behind me. Slowly, I opened my eyes. The door was still closed, but the creature had moved away from it. My heart racing, I was about to make a break for it, when I realized where the slurping sounds were coming from. My sister's bed. I whirled around and bolted toward the monster without thought. I didn't care if I got hurt or killed. I was worthless. But I had to save my sister. I was not going to lose another one. Whipping back the curtain once more, I watched as the gigantic creature hunched over my sickly sibling and sank its teeth even deeper into her abdomen. She coughed weakly, and blood sprayed onto her pillow. Horrified, I stared as the last dregs of fat were sucked out of my sister's body and into Monster Tanya's stomach. I felt like a total pussy just standing and watching as this thing killed my remaining sister, but what was I supposed to do? Punch it? I didn't have a weapon and I had no idea how to fight. Panic and fear fought for my mind's attention, but self-hatred outweighed them both. The monster grew even larger. I turned and ran for the door, hoping to find someone that could do something, but by the time I ripped open the door, it was too late. I frantically called for help, and a dozen nurses poured into my room to see what the fuss was. The hospital room was silent, Tanya was gone, and my sister was dead. I mourned her loss, regretting the way I had envied both of my sisters and let that envy get in the way of our relationships. I was sad, confused, and angry, but I realized something. I had to take on the beast myself, and this time, I knew how to fight it. By the middle of June, I had a plan. It was far from perfect, and it was very possible that it would go wrong. To be honest, I was far from ready, even though I had been training since the day of my little sister's death. But I had to try. I reopened my laptop for the first time in what felt like ages. I breathed in deeply, held it, and then released slowly. In the flash drive window, I clicked on Final Round. This time, the video did not show a peppy Pilates coach. The screen displayed Danya's empty studio, and for a moment, I sat there, confused. What was going on? It was then that I realized why she was not on screen. It was because she was here. I tore my eyes away from the screen and they fell upon a massive, dark silhouette in the corner of my living room. It was nighttime outside, so the sun offered no assistance in illuminating the creature that had killed my sisters. It lurched closer and opened its gaping maw. A small voice emanated from it. Good job. You've got this. Got this. Just 3 more seconds. It was Danya's voice, but it sounded like it was glitching. The voice began to distort in the same way it had at my sister's deathbed. 3, 2, 2, 2, 1. It suddenly let out a screech so shrill and loud that I thought my eardrums would burst. The monster's fangs elongated as they had before, but this time, they seemed even longer and sharper. Its wide eyes began to bleed as it lifted its talons to my face to caress my neck. The sensation sent chills down my spine, but I managed to hold onto my bladder. This was it. I picked up my weapon. I opened the small red journal to the very first line page. Affirmations, it was titled. The monster moved closer and wrapped its muscular arms around me. I began to read. I am a really talented singer. I screamed at the monster who had begun to lift me off the ground. It hissed and snarled at me. It was angry. I loved my sense of empathy. I continued, louder this time. The beast screeched and dropped me, its palms and arms blistering in response to my words. I am smart, funny, and brave. Its arms began to shrivel as it stumbled backwards. I believed as hard as I could. I am strong and I will persevere. I have so much potential. I am beautiful and I fucking love myself. I shouted as hard as my lungs would allow. The sound the monster emitted as it died was like nails on a chalkboard, and this time, my ears really did begin to bleed. It shrank smaller and smaller until it shifted entirely back to its human form. Before me, drenched in sweat and looking absolutely exhausted, sat Tanya. She was breathing hard as she looked up at me with wide eyes, blood dripping out of the corner of her mouth. Then, as suddenly as she seemed to have appeared, she was gone. I saw her sprint out the door, but by the time I looked out my window, she had disappeared. I've got a long way to go on my way to recovery. I've suffered loss and tragedy, and a sadness so deep that I thought I couldn't live. But I'm getting better. I write new affirmations every day, partly because I worry that Tanya might decide to come back, but mostly because it makes me appreciate myself for who I am rather than hating myself because of what I was. I hope that practicing self-care in your life will come in handy just as much in your life as it has in mine, and no matter what, don't stop trying. Love yourself, because if you don't, your quality of life is bound to suffer.